B-A-T. It's in the name.
Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about cancer survivorship and all the stuff that goes along with that and some of the things that we've done to try to help people. And we'll have that important conversation right after these important messages. This episode of the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast is brought to you by the Heritage Event, featuring 8 Oats, Saturday, August 23rd at the Renaissance Shoals Conference Center. This show kicks off at 7 p.m., doors open at 6:15, and table sponsors enjoy an exclusive dinner starting at 5 p.m. Reserve your table of 10, explore a variety of sponsorship opportunities, or grab your general admission tickets today. Contact Tammy Dial at tdial, D-I-A-L, at hcu.edu or visit www.hcu.edu for more info. I'm Travis Creasy. That's all-pro counselor, 3-court counseling in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and the pulpit minister for the Highland Park Church of Christ. Ben Hayes, how's it going?
It's going well. It has been already the beginning of summer, so excited to be getting things kicked off. I think this week, not as we're recording this, but as it is airing, I think you're going to be doing a little relaxing down at the beach. It won't be long before I'm going to be taking a trip with my wife and at least one of my kids. Not sure how many are going to go, but we're going to do Destin's senior trip in a couple of weeks. And so getting excited about going up to Mackinac Island in Michigan. So we'll see how that goes.
Snazzy up there in the mitten state.
Way on up there.
I would be willing to guess that if I've been driving, and that's what I do, I'm going to be using some Magic Mind to get me there, to keep me alert on the road. And wonderful sponsor that we've had, and it's been great to have them on board. And certainly they're offering a discount code, and it's magicmind.com, BAT40, and you get 40% off your subscription, but only for the first 10 orders. So you got to get on the ball to get on that. And some of the fun words, right? There's some fun stuff in this. As I always start with, ashwagandha has been used for thousands of years. And it's going to, if it worked for them, it can work for us. Turmeric, lion's, we talked about lion's mane. That's like the coolest thing because I need some of that in my life. So yeah, check it out. magicmind.com/BAT40. The first 10 orders, get on it. It's easy to unsubscribe. You can do it by text, I'm pretty sure, but check them out. It's great. There's no crash. It's just good old clean energy, if I can use that phrase, when it comes to a drink like that. But that's what we're going to run with. And as I mentioned, Ben, on Sunday after this or before this podcast aired is Cancer Survivors Day. And so across the nation and maybe the world, people are celebrating surviving cancer. And I love the definition. I think the definition alone has helped me a lot because if you hear that you have the diagnosis of cancer and it didn't keep you from living life from that point to however long it was, then you're a survivor of cancer. And I don't think that I thought that way, right? I thought, when my treatment's done, when it's all over, then I can say I'm a survivor, but that's not actually true. And we certainly here on the podcast talk about mental health and the importance of positivity and hope and all those things. And certainly I can speak from experience having leukemia. You can speak from having experience with your son Cypress having a battle as well. That, man, the mindset is such a game changer. And to know you can look at anybody who's heard the word cancer is going to be a part of their life, and they just kept living. I think that's a great definition.
It's I think anybody listening to this right now, every single person could probably name at least one person that's struggling with cancer. If you can't, you must not know very many people. And I know that that's I hate to even say that. It sounds kind of cold and callous to say it, but it's just seems like it's everywhere.
Mhm.
That somebody is struggling with it. Maybe not leukemia, but we've got multiple people who we're associated with at church and at school, and varying degrees of things that they're facing. And so I think it's safe to say every single person is impacted by cancer, or has been impacted by cancer, or will be impacted by cancer. And so I think it's an important conversation for us just to have as a way of reminder. We've talked about your journey on several occasions. We've talked to other people, Miss Chandler, who's my boss at school, with I think we had April Houghton at some point.
Yes.
We friends with her, and we've talked with her about that on several occasions. And so there's a lot of people who we've talked to about it. But I wanted to just maybe spend a few minutes picking your brain a little bit about just some things that maybe can help other people. And one of the things that I think that's helpful to know is, when you go through some of these things we've talked about before, you can help other people through it. It kind of qualifies you to do that. But what are some things that maybe surviving leukemia, going through the battle, what are some things that either helped you stay strong or changed kind of the way you look at things afterwards, that maybe can drive some people, give some people hope of, here's some things that you learned, here's some things maybe they could be learning, and here's some ways that it will take them into the future.
I think I had the head knowledge that people have problems, they have issues and things going on, but it certainly moved that knowledge to my heart. People generally are doing the best that they know how to do. Now we can make judgment calls on how much they know to do. We might could help them along, but ultimately everyone's got something in their life that could be better. And if you're like me, there are multiple somethings that could be better. And so it's made me a more compassionate person. You may have met me recently and been like, man, I'd hate to see him before. And I'd be right there with you. But man, it's just made me realize, at the very least, when I go to school or I go to work or I go do something, regardless of my attitude or what I'm feeling that day, I don't want to do any harm. Let's not make things worse. And starting there has helped me get to the point where let's make people's day better, if we can do that. And being in a place where you're getting treatment where no one wants to be, but the people who come in there are able to have a smile on their face or have hope or have a conversation that isn't about cancer, even though you're sitting in a cancer ward, is a big deal. And the thing is it's like grief. It's not a ladder. It's not steps really. It's kind of back and forth. There are days where I didn't want to talk about cancer. The last thing I want to talk about was cancer. But then there's the same day, sometimes I want to be treated differently. I want to be, pampered, and I have cancer, so leave me alone. Or, and it's just like any emotion or anything that happens to you. One minute you don't want to talk about it, you want to bring it up, and the next minute you're like, but I'm super emotional, I need to talk about it. And just being understanding that everybody has something they're dealing with, and at the
Yeah.
very least, I don't want to make it worse, but also I want to look for the ways to make it better if I can.
Well, one of the things we've talked about before with grief is that Kubler-Ross was the one who came up with kind of the 5 stages of grief. And it wasn't about when someone else dies and the aftermath. It's actually about the dying process. So a lot of those 5 steps they're not linear. They're not like this happens, then this happens, then this happens, but you kind of bounce around to each one of those. And, with that, that's what you're going through when you're going through, you obviously didn't go through the dying process, but it could have ended
Yeah.
much differently, right? And it does for some people. And so that process is something that they go through, and they kind of have to gain that acceptance as they move through those things. So let me, kind of along that same line, and you've already somewhat touched on it, but what are some ways, what are some things that can be very helpful? Like one thing you said just a moment ago that I think was important is some days you wanted to be pampered and some days you just want to have a normal conversation. So what do you think are some ways, there may be others besides that, but I'll lead with that question. What are some ways people can be aware of that? Is it something where they need to just sort of read the room, or are there ways that you can communicate those things back and forth to each other so that this is a day I need pampering, or this is a day that the person I'm helping. So like for those who may be helping someone go through this.
Yeah. I think ask the question. I've gotten a point. I've been trained by Miss Whitney that when there's a problem, I'd ask the question, is it something you want me to solve, or is this something you just want me to listen to? And I think it'd be better to just be blunt. More than likely, if you're around them and they feel bad, like you're there for a reason. You're there because they have allowed you to be there. So you're there to kind of fulfill that reason some way. And so if you're confused, just ask, what do you want me to do? Or, how can I be of better help? And sometimes you just got to be ready for the answer if I don't know. I know we've spoke and you've talked to at length about, presence is a great present. Just being there and being available, because I think I struggled with the world is moving on, especially when I was in the hospital.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it felt like everything froze in my life and everybody else was going on with theirs. And so, just having someone to reach out and go, man, I'm thinking about you, it can be a Facebook, we're probably more connected than we've ever been. But in some ways we're not attuned. And I think those are two different things. Of course, once again, we've talked about that, but, just ask the question if you're confused. I think it means a lot to even be asked, what do you need? Maybe the answer is, I don't know, but I was pretty clear headed on what I wanted in the moment. And so just ask, don't be afraid. Trust me, if they're going through cancer treatment, they've been poked and prodded, and maybe they'll just tell you, have been poked and prodded enough. Leave me alone, and just be prepared for the honesty. But you're there for a reason. You're a trusted person that's allowed to see them in whatever. I look like a drowned rat when I was going through treatments. So be that person, ask the questions. Ben, I know for Cyprus, you and Kenya, y'all had to be kind of the go-between. You were the adult in the situation, and so you had to make a lot of decisions. And one of the things I feel bad about was I wasn't one of those people that was there for you. I feel like that window in your life kind of passed and I didn't do a whole lot. And so, but I'm sure you had those people around you, and there are probably times where you had to be kind of abrupt with people, especially in the hospital, maybe. So,
yeah, our time was real quick. It was a matter of, knowing the surgery was coming, having the surgery, and going home from the surgery. And it wasn't like a really long extended stay like yours was. And I know I came over a time or two with yours, but I think it's maybe the truth with everybody's, I don't know if anybody ever feels like you do enough in a situation like that. And then the time is kind of gone. And I felt that way the same time when you were going through that. I tried to at least be on the text messages as often as I could. And I felt like that was the case with you guys as well, as we were, going through that with Cyprus. And so I think that's one of the things that I learned, especially even going through with Dad. I know his wasn't a cancer journey per se, but very similar. As he was going through dementia and, all the many things with that it's just helpful to have a group of people that you can lean on. It's helpful to have a group of guys you can text with, like I do with you guys.
Say just about anything.
Yeah. That on those days it's really tough, you can laugh about some things. You can, sometimes maybe even, pray over each other in those moments. You can sometimes challenge each other in those moments, whatever it is that we needed. And I felt like that's always been a gift to have the church, but specifically to have some of those people that we're closest to in those moments. And so I felt like that was a big thing for us, for me personally, to kind of have that. And I think that, question I wanted to ask you was, do you find that you appreciate things or see the world differently than you did before? And I think you kind of answered that in one way with, when people are hurting, you see it a little differently.
Yeah, it's hard to balance, and part of it's I'm older, the cynicism. You've lived life, you've seen things go poorly. But one of the great things I think really I guess before my diagnosis, I wouldn't think that this would be a great thing to say. I think it would feel morbid. And I think when people hear me say it, it's really easy to go, man, that's a morbid thought. But you really do get a heavy dose of life is short. And when the sun's shining, enjoy it. When it's raining outside, enjoy it. You really get what you put into it. And we've all seen people, Ben, you've experienced loss. We've experienced loss together. And, it seems to ring true, that song. I don't know, it's not biblical and it's not really true, but the good die young, and it's like those people who flash across the screen and don't get a lot of time seem to be the most energetic people. And obviously your dad is not that way. He lived a long life, worked hard, had friends. We all respected and loved him. But I guess the statement really is the good people. I'm not speaking biblically. I think the Bible teaches that we're just not really good in comparison to humans, but
right.
Compared to God, compared to humans, they're good people. And your dad certainly falls in that category. But I guess the real statement of that is the good ones they're never around long enough.
Right.
If we wouldn't wish your dad to live to be 120 right. or Tabitha or anybody else that's passed away to live that long. But it's like, we're selfish. It's the same thing with this dog running around here, like this golden retriever. She just don't live long enough because she just loves everybody. And
it's never enough time, no matter how much time we get.
Exactly. And that's part of the moving down to Dothan. Like, I know by moving down just by distance, there's going to be some changes, but there also, in some ways, there might actually be more time to spend together and do things because my schedule will change. And
that's true.
I told you, and I've told everybody, like the window with the kids being little is short, and I'm not out here to draw any tears from anybody. But it's a short window, and you better pour into them when you have the opportunity because it don't last long.
It goes by so fast, and they tell you that, they warn you that, but it does. I've got two that have graduated now, and it's scary how fast it moves. So, I've got a friend, we've got friends at church who've just received cancer diagnosis. A couple of them, actually. They're older members, but that doesn't lessen the blow any. It's just a hard thing when you get that diagnosis. What advice would you give someone who's just been given that diagnosis?
Don't text your best friend that you have the diagnosis. Call them.
I agree. That's a good thing, as one who received that text message.
Yeah. It's, I forget how the phrase goes. I'm sure we've shared it before. It's not the amount of days, but the quality. And, I was blessed because when you hear that, I guess that my next jump was when I heard, you have leukemia. I think you have this kind. We're going to go ahead and start treating you for this kind because that's how sure I am. And you wait for time frame or a stage, right? And with leukemia, I don't think there are stages. The leukemia I had was an emergency on the front end, and you can, it was touch and go for about 48 hours. But I
learned even more later that it was very close.
Yes, very, very close. 3 to 5 days from not waking up. But you kind of jump for that. And maybe if you're listening to this, you've had that. You've heard the date. You know kind of the range of how much time you have. Or maybe you're like me and you're like, hey, we caught it. It's a good diagnosis. We can treat it. But it's really what I said. It's not the amount, it's the quality. Like, what can we get out of this? And it really is that way for everybody listening to this podcast, right? Because we're not guaranteed another day to see the sun rise. But what we can do, because we believe in God, we believe in Jesus, we believe in the Spirit, that we can squeeze a lot of life out of that. Jesus said, I came to give life and life abundantly. There are people who come to steal, kill, and destroy, but he came to give life and life abundantly. And it's one of those things, like, mourn, grieve, allow yourself to do that. There's nothing wrong with any of that. And like Ben said, it comes, it goes. There are days to this day where it hits and it's like, oh my, I really went through that. Like, who is that guy? How did he do that? I don't know that I can do that again, nor that I want to. Let those emotions come. They're real, but don't let them dictate to you, how you're going to be going forward.
Well, and I would add to that, as I'm not a survivor, so I can't speak to it from that standpoint, but as a counselor, as a minister who's worked with people, I would add to that you have the opportunity to, like you said, do as much as you can with what you have, and just, I guess from that standpoint, fight, but don't be afraid to bear all those emotions, and don't feel bad because you have them. I think that's the biggest thing, that sometimes when people get angry, because you're going to have those emotions, anger, denial, or whatever else, when you have them, and allow yourself to be angry, allow yourself to be sad, allow yourself to be happy. The feelings are not bad. None of them are. And so just allow those things to go, and you're not fighting through those things. You're allowing those things to happen, but you're fighting the cancer through those things, and allow those emotions to happen. Cause I just think sometimes we're scared to have emotions, and, like
I know
you
that
said,
I was afraid, and still am to some degree, afraid that I'll go into my emotions and I'll never come out of them.
Right.
And so I think that's wrong-headed thinking. But then going in and going, it'll never be the same, different, and staying in that spot. And I think the devil wants us to be in one or the other,
Yep.
And really what he hates is, oh yeah, I'm struggling today. I'm hurting today. This is the emotion I'm feeling, but it's not going to last forever. And I can come out of this, I guess, ride the ride. In some ways in which we've fought, not hand to hand, you and I, although that has happened on occasion. I sometimes think about horror movies when that guy is just slowly walking down the road while the other person screams running. And I tell my students, at some point I'm going to get tired of running. I'm going to get tired of screaming. And that guy may take me out, but he's going to remember that guy that bit him in the ankles and just took plugs out of him as he sent me into the great sun.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I look at life, period. Like, eventually, unless the Lord comes back, my expiration day will come. But whatever that looks like, I'm going to be found fighting tooth and nail. And of course, we do a lot of things to help with St. Jude. The dodgeball tournament's coming up in August. We run, and we raise money. Both you and I are both trying to raise $4,000 a piece. The dodgeball comes out of that. Yes, we need you to help us. I'll put the link down. Donate. I'm even putting customized players on my baseball video game. You can donate.
Very nice.
25, and I'll put you on a team of your choosing, customize you, put you in the position you want. At 50, I'll do that, and you get a shout out here on the Helping Healing Humor podcast. If you do 100, you can own a team. You can rename it, do the uniform colors, put yourself on it, and get a shout out on the podcast. So all kinds of different ways, but that's kind of the way we fight. We fight with goofy dodgeball tournaments and getting
Yeah,
together
and
in
those are good
December
ways.
and running.
Well, and I think, I'm going to use this chance to say this because I think both of us can agree with this. And a lot of our listeners, I think, already agree with this. And if you're a listener that for some reason you picked up listening to this podcast for the mental health part, and occasionally you have to sit through the spiritual aspect of it, we understand, I understand, Travis understands that in the end, you were going to win either way.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing, spiritually speaking.
Such a game changer.
Yeah. When I'm winning either way. And that's where, at the end of the book of Hebrews or the chapter of Hebrews 11, there's all these people who succeeded in their faith and they overcame kingdoms and they, just defeated the enemy. And then at the end of the chapter, it talks about people who were sawn in two and lived in caves and holes in the ground, were put to death because of their faith. And they're all considered victors. And the reason is because they win either way. They win spiritually when they stand up to evil. They win spiritually when they go through battles on earth and make it through them physically, or when they go through battles on earth and they don't, because there's a spiritual renewal. There's a spiritual home where there aren't any of those pains and struggles. And so whatever it is that you're facing right now, I think the great part about it is no matter what, just like Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego went in the fire, they came out of it.
Yeah.
But even if they didn't, they won. So
even if he doesn't save us.
Yeah. Even if he doesn't, they still got a place with him. So from the spiritual aspect, I think that makes a huge difference. And I've shared this with my dad's struggle. I remember the first time we went into a neurologist to talk about his dementia, and the doctor was just sort of trying to let him down easy, like, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be a slow deal. It wasn't maybe as slow as we thought it would be, kind of ended up being faster, but he's trying to kind of let Dad down easy. And Dad looked at him and said, I'm okay. I know where I'm going, and I had to fight back tears then. And still, when I think about that, I still do, but it has brought a lot of hope knowing that Dad knew that regardless, he was okay. It wasn't going to be the end of his story. So,
and you and I both know
that brings that hope.
Ben, we've grown up, and maybe it's part of our faith background somewhat. Maybe people forgive me for saying that, but we've grown up knowing people and people in our family who served God, faithfully their entire life. They did all the things that they knew to do and still lacked confidence that God was going to do what he's going to do. And so, right on with Ben, right on with what his dad said, what they said in the book of Daniel, right? You can have confidence because God is who he says he is. And so, if I could relieve some of that, there's some way that we can give you confidence and that hope that God is who he says he is, much like Ben expressed with his dad. Reach out. Reach out. hello@benandtravis.com. If you're going through a cancer journey or there's some way that we can pray for you, you're going through something, hello@benandtravis.com. Please let us know. We'd love to pray about it. Love to pass it on to our community in our Facebook group, our email list. But Ben, I appreciate the conversation. Always good to touch base with you. And it's always good to see another Cancer Survivors Day. I like seeing those roll around because it means I've been blessed to be here another year. And we certainly praying for all those who listen that your circumstances will be lightened or that you'll use them to lighten the load of someone else. So we'll see you next time.
Enjoy celebrating on the beach.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.